like Roswell. People forget this about Roswell, that whilst it's taken as the greatest UFO case, and it happened in 1947, actually, if you look at the UFO literature from the mid-50s, from the first best-selling books to the end of the 70s, you don't see a lot of Roswell in there, despite that press release about the flying saucer. Yeah, it comes down to Roswell really takes off when the National Enquirer picked it up in 1978, and then the Roswell incident book a couple of years later. At which point, all these people are saying, "Yeah, well, we were guarding the cargo, and and loads of these crash retrieval stories come out after that."
So one of the things I truly believe is that, same as the paranormal stuff. Now, every time I think, why does ghost stories come about? And if someone tells me about a ghost story that's been there since the 1800s, and I go back, I look at that town, look at the village, but I also look at what plays were on at that time.
Right, yeah.
And so, like when Macbeth come out, and all these sort of ones, you'd get more people would start reporting things like ghosts and all this, because obviously they start thinking about that, or they get creeped out by things, and they say, "Oh my God, I see something." Back then, obviously, there wasn't no movies, there was no cinema, so just sitting around telling stories. So you used to get local people in the community would have visiting showmen that come there and tell them these ghost stories. That would then make people more likely to see something that wasn't really there, or something would fall over and they start saying it's a ghost. And so, old Jack the Fisherman's come back, or something like that.
Yeah.
That gets written down, and then more people say they've seen it, or believe they've seen it. And I think that can happen with the UFO stuff. And it's interesting, every time we've got, like after Independence Day, another spike in UFO. Every time something is reported, we get a spike in something.
Well, yeah, and also to do with what people literally report. So the grey aliens that are ubiquitous now, there are two big spikes in what brings about lots of grey sightings. First of all, post-Close Encounters of the Third Kind, right, the movie. And before that, again, if you look at the literature, people in the 60s and early 70s are reporting a range of alien types, including, I missed the Nordics, right? the tall, humanoid, highly intelligent, hippie aliens. They were great, but, they're not hanging around these days. They're certainly, the Nordics wouldn't have been the types that were going to sort of inseminate babies and breed a alien master race. And then another watershed. Okay, it's hard literally to prove it, but Whiteley Strieber's book Communion, when that came out, which would be about just before when I was teaching you, it had an amazing publicity campaign, because what you saw on things like bus shelters and just other billboards were the front cover and a phone number, right? I.e. there's a face of an alien and a phone number, and obviously you rang up the phone number and you discovered that there was a book coming out by, because he's a best-selling author. Yeah, exactly.
Great tactic.
Well, yeah, but what was amazing about that, first of all, was that publicity campaign really worked because the face kind of resonated with people. But post-Communion, that particular book cover, because it was a huge seller, but the cover and the poster were widely seen, including by people who had absolutely no interest in it. And it's interesting, there's been a kind of homogenization of the kind of aliens that were seen. Because prior to that, some of the 1950s cases and before that, they're just gloriously surreal. I cannot remember the case or the play or anything like that, but I know, when I used to do the presentations in conferences, I was always databasing this stuff. When I was reading books, I was like, and I know there was somebody decades before that who was abducted aboard a UFO and claimed to see stone walls in it. Doesn't happen these days. We've got, we have a much clearer idea apparently of what we should expect, and therefore, like with your ghost things, people just see it, and there are a lot of cases where the debunking of something would say, well, what people see and what they might perceive explains the case, right? So like I cannot remember the name of the scientist, the guy that I was talking to you about before we were filming this, about the scientific theory that says basically a lot of ghosts are condensing water vapor in cooling buildings, while sound waves that have been busy through the day because the buildings have been full are gradually bouncing between the walls and slowing down.
Yeah.
But that explains grey mists, and a lot of ghost stories start with grey figures that are spectral, that you can see through them, often in long corridors, right? And so you could plausibly say, well, actually...
And they're the ones that tend to get picked up on CCTV.
Yes, of
These
course,
grey mists things.
Yes, well, exactly, because they'd be there. I mean, there's no question then that they were produced in a laboratory, and Lord knows what it is, but there are one or two UFO cases. I mean, Project Hestel and ufologists are pretty much unique in ufology, that they were the only ones who would go to their research work expecting to see UFOs, and they did, right? And there's no question about whether they were seeing aliens, but they were seeing, like, some electrical event in the atmosphere in this valley in Norway, which was behaving sometimes like ball lightning and other times like a plasma, and I'm not enough of a scientist to tell you what the difference is between the two of them exactly.
Northern Lights, isn't it? Northern Lights.
Well, that sort of thing, yeah. I remember, I met one of those guys, Odd Gunnar Road his name was, and I met him at a conference, and I mean, now this is dedication, isn't it? They were working in a caravan which had some power supply, but they'd got a little radar, and they could film things and photograph things, but they only had so much power in the place, so to turn the radar on, they had to turn the heating off, and this is Norway in the middle of winter. And I remember saying to him, he was just telling me before he did his presentation at this conference, he was just telling me about the whole thing and whatever, and I sort of said to him, it must have been cold then, and he just looked at me like, oh, don't ask, yeah. I mean, that's dedication.
They're freezing there.
But they were, yeah. I mean, basically, if I remember the story correctly, he'd got like the gear that he used to use for skiing and everything, and he'd got his thermals and everything on. And even then, they're sitting there thinking, this is really cold. As in literally, can we not turn the radar off and warm up for half an hour? Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's no puzzle why a lot of the strange UFO stuff is happening in Russia and all that, because there's lack of information coming out there, and people couldn't just go and find it. The areas are so vast. But when we look at like the meteorite strike in Russia, if you can go back 100 years and you see that.
Oh, the Tunguska one, you mean? Yeah.
You'd swear that was a UFO burning up in the atmosphere or crash landing, or.
You wouldn't understand it, yeah.
No.
And I mean, if you go back, centuries, people are reading fortunes, people are reading signs from God into those events, aren't
they? Because there's one in Bristol, and it appears in a painting as well. We've got a UFO in the background, and that was meant to be witnessed by like the whole city. Which again, but could that have been something like a meteorite, or could it be a comet? These sort of things you don't know, and I guess if you go back centuries and you had was it Hale-Bopp?
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine how people would have thought of that?
Yeah.
And they've seen this thing through the sky. And
well, it took a long time for people to understand some of the, such as I understand it anyway, so, some things about the movement of comets, and we've got that Oumuamua, that asteroid that's passed through the solar system recently, that's tumbling.
That's when they're saying it could be a spaceship or something.
Yeah, and I heard a quite serious-minded scientist discussing that not too long ago, and his argument actually goes back to an argument you'll find in some of the books that claim that the moon's artificial, that we shouldn't think about building spaceships in the way that we think about building moon rockets. If we were going to explore larger areas, it would make sense to build them out of the same components that are used for asteroids, basically, that form asteroids, because they're quite resilient when they travel through the atmosphere, the solar system, or through the galaxy. And the one that's moving through our solar system, I mean, the best evidence seems to be that it's just happened upon us, and it's behaving as it would do. It's tumbling, and it's, you can look at it and say, well, it's made out of the same material that we see in asteroids. It looks like an asteroid. Yeah. It's behaving as if it's got quite a lot of metal in its structure, but then that's normal with asteroids and stuff anyway. But no, I've heard people say if you were going to build a probe that was just going to explore the galaxy, right? I'm not sure about that one, but
it would make sense.
It would, yeah.
I mean, when you think of our probes that we send out there, they're all like spiny and very fragile.
Yeah. Well, they're designed to do the job that we want them to do and to relay the information that we want, and we've not seriously thought about designing something that was...
Well, ironically, yesterday Voyager 2 passed out of our solar system, and getting data back from that, I think we've still got some working instruments on there. So that's going to be interesting to see what that comes back to.
It is, but of course that was designed to teach us about our own solar system and past our own planets, right? So anything beyond here is a bonus, isn't it? But you're right, the instruments and the communication equipment is decades old by our standards. Probably will be incomprehensible to anybody who finds it.
Yeah.
It's pretty old school now because there's more computer technology in my watch, and that's not particularly expensive either. But so it's not designed for that. I don't struggle with the idea that something that looks like an asteroid might be the best design if we were actually going to build craft to explore.
One of the big questions, have you ever seen a UFO? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so have I.
Right.
But I will say it was a UFO, an unidentified flying object. I'm not saying it's the aliens.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting outside my old house with my neighbour in the summer, looking up at the sky, and we just see this ship fly over the top.
Right.
And we both went in, looking up, we'd seen ghosts, and our girlfriends were there, and they went, you okay? And we was just like, we've just seen a UFO. And we both ran off and drew what we thought we'd see, and it both matched. The internet was a bad thing, so I went onto the Sky at Night website and logged it on there. Did anyone see this? And there's reports from Glasgow right the way down to Dover of this thing that had gone over. And obviously the space stations, it was completely the wrong direction, but it was quite low. But it's hard to judge how high or low it was. But it was dead silent, and it just come over and just carried on going. And me and my wife, we just looked at each other and we didn't talk. And and to tell people, I've seen the UFO, you think, oh my God, now they're going to think I'm crazy. But I look at it that the military are doing so many developments.
Yeah, that's what I would be suspicious of in a case like that, actually. Yeah.
It's that you don't know. And I was waiting for years later for a new prototype plane coming out or something like that, but nothing did. Nothing really moved on that we know about.
If you can't estimate the height and the distance, you don't know how big it is, so it might be way smaller than a plane.
It was bigger. I'd say, as it came over, because I could judge it from the house,
right?
It was a lot wider than, 3-4 houses, but it was totally silent, and it was seen all over. And I've been looking up on the internet last night to try and see if I could find any reports, because...
So how long ago was that?
That was in about 2003.
Okay.
2002, 2003. And so, and it's got to be reports of it somewhere. And I think it was in August as well.
Right.
But I'm trying to find it again, because I knew I was going to show you some evidence of it. But again, I'm that sort of person that, I see something, I definitely know I saw it, but I lean to the military answer than the alien answer.
I would go that way, because it's, apart from anything else, it's the most credible way to look at it. If you rule everything else out, every other possible explanation, then what you're left with is the fantastic. Yeah. So I've never seen anything like that. The two things I've seen that would prompt UFO reports on, I saw a meteorite crash, which is quite unusual, when I was a kid, and it actually came down in Northern Ireland, but I was living in West Cumbria at the time, and it came right over our house. So it basically flew across the Lake District, across our house, crossed the North Sea, and crashed in Northern Ireland. So I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's got a Wikipedia page explaining it all. Although there were UFO reports to do with that. And then the only The other thing that I saw, which was quite mysterious, I would put down to military activity.